All right, Pete, what do you got to wind us up for the week on sports?
All right, so we all know the NFL season's just about ready to start as well as college football. And so I wanted to just jump on this one, John. Is there one team out there? It might be your Chicago Bears, by the way, but is there one team out there that last year was not in the playoffs? They were eliminated, but they've done enough in the offseason. They've done enough in the draft and all of what's been going on. And let's be honest, free agency, specifically free agency, even happening now where there's some signings going on. And I'm going to throw out there Atlanta. And the reason I say the Atlanta Falcons, John, is this. So they're in a division with New Orleans and Carolina, and it's interesting for sure. Tampa Bay has been pretty damn good. Their quarterback is playing well. Speaking of which, at Atlanta, they've got two new quarterbacks, right? Whether or not it's Kirk Cousins, he's healthy and he's able to stay healthy, that's going to be a challenge. We'll have to see because he's not exactly the youngest quarterback in the NFL. But then you got Michael Penix behind him, right? So you've answered that question of what's wrong with this team. What was wrong last year was not the running back. Bijan Robinson was a stud. They got great receivers. They got Kyle Pitts at tight end. Great offensive line. Big linebackers that can run. They've just added even more. As a matter of fact, 5 of their 8 draft picks came to the defensive side, and they went out and grabbed themselves a defensive end up there from New England. So the combination of all that tells me that they're focused on the defense, which was not that bad last year anyway, and the offense was the problem. Well, maybe the offense actually can turn that corner. I think this is a team that last year was 7-10. I think these guys go double digits. I think they could win at least 10 and maybe more games this year based upon the fact that they finally have some quarterbacks who can throw the ball. He could throw the ball out there to Drake London and all these receivers that they've got in the tight end. I really think Atlanta could be one of those shocker teams where people all of a sudden midway through the season go, hey, who are these guys?
Could be. Sure could be. I was looking around, Pete, and I was looking at NFL odds and things. And by the way, do you know who the comeback players of the year are scheduled to be, perhaps, Pete? At least where the money is right now? Aaron Rodgers and Joe Burrow. Because remember, folks, Joe Burrow went out in week 11 last year. So it became very difficult for Cincinnati without their star quarterback, just as it was difficult for the Jets without theirs. That's going to be an interesting one to watch, Pete, and I wouldn't mind putting some money on that myself, quite frankly. I do like Cincy. I think Cleveland also, Pete, one of the best offensive line, defensive line setups. I mean, that beast on the defensive line for Cleveland is just incredible. One of the best defensive players there are, 95. And I think people have to overcompensate for him. And because of that, it opens up stuff, as it always does, for other players. So watch as to whether or not Deshaun Jackson keeps his head on straight and everything. And if he does, Cleveland might be one of those teams, Pete.
It could be. I like your call on the Jets, too, because the Jets' defense last year remained really, really good. The problem was they didn't have anybody at quarterback, because once you lost Aaron Rodgers, you started going through the usual suspects, and none of them could step up. There was too many interceptions. The offense was not really doing what they needed to do on their side of the ball, but the defense was. So I like that one a lot. My only issue with Cleveland at all is I'm not so sure Deshaun is the same quarterback that he once was. And I'm going all the way back to Clemson. But in any case, maybe he is. I know right now a lot of people feel like he might be the most overpaid athlete in the NFL because he got a monster contract and he really hasn't had much to show for that contract. How about this, John? NFL receivers. Now, I will submit to you this. I think that the receivers in the NFL, that is the deepest position of all the positions in the NFL. It's not quarterback, it's not O-line, it's not D-line, it's not running backs, blah, blah, blah. I really do think it's the wide receivers. And it's interesting to me, John, that suddenly they're paying these guys so much money when the fact is everybody's got a number one receiver that's damn good. Everybody. 32 teams, you're going to find a receiver on every single one of those teams. You're not going to find a quarterback on every one of those teams. You're not going to find a running back on every one of those teams, and different other positions. So I think what I'm getting at is this. I think these general managers are freaking screwing up by paying the kinds of money that they're paying. And we all know that a lot of them are still holding out, right? San Francisco with Ayuk, you go down to Dallas and you've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got Chase, you've got all these guys who want that $30-35 million contract, which, by the way, that would be 10% of what you're paying for the entire team. Now, we already have a huge percentage going to the quarterback. And if we're suddenly going to give another 10% of all our money, the $255 million you can spend into this receiver. And John, I'll ask you this. Is the 10th receiver that much different from the first receiver? And is the 20th receiver that much different than the 10th receiver? I just look at this and say, hey, if I'm a GM, there's enough good guys. And by the way, in the draft this year, John, first 37 picks, you know what the deepest was? Wide receiver. 10 went in the first 37 picks of the draft this last year. So those are the guys who aren't going to be getting 20 and 30 million. I think these guys are paying too much, and you could just revolve this thing around every couple of years and just keep on drafting these wide receivers, paying them a heck of a lot less, and then you've got room for the rest of the team. What do you think?
Well, yeah. Clearly, Pete, if you're talking about like a guy like Chris Jones, defensive tackle for Kansas City, there aren't too many Chris Joneses out there. And he makes the most of any D end. He makes 31+ million a year. Travis Kelce, 17 million at tight end. I would say to you, Pete, that he's certainly one of the best tight ends, but you can find a lot of tight ends that are really good. And the separation isn't like this. The separation is really tight between, I mean, your team, the Vikings, have one of the best tight ends. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying he's the same player as Travis Kelce, but he's close. When you're talking about those wide receivers, I agree with you. It is a much narrower separation. Sometimes it's speed, like the cheetah down in Miami. Other times it's body. You've got a big body like the kid up in Seattle, Pete, that just nobody can stop that guy. But you've got defensive ends like Nick Bosa making 33-34 million a year. You look at a Christian McCaffrey, Pete. Are some of these wide receivers worth double what Christian McCaffrey makes? He's the number one running back. He makes 19 million a year. Some of these receivers are going to make double that. And like you said, apparently these GMs don't understand supply and demand, because if you have an oversupply at one position, like you've described, with an awful lot of really good wide receivers, then it's not working the way that modern theory would say that it should work. You should be flipping that upside down. McCaffrey should be, as the standout running back, making that $38 million, and the receivers should be making 19. But that's not the way it works. We both know it.
Well, the one last thing I'd say on that note is this. McCaffrey might be the best receiver in the NFL. He just might be, even though he's a running back, right? I mean, the guy's a running back, he's a receiver, and he throws the ball once in a while. And this guy, he is the best athlete in the NFL, bar none. People can say whatever they want, but this guy's playing and can play three positions. That's pretty amazing.
He is amazing.